Good evening. There are eternal principles that rule the world, like seed time and harvest, the fundamental necessity of sleep and waking up, light as well as darkness. These are few which are incontrovertible, but history cannot number the times the eternal principles of right and wrong have been subjected to fierce debates by great minds and even peasants. Ethics, morality, religion have separated people for generations. But are you religious because of the length of your hair? Is the depth of your religion measured by the diversity of your tongues? Imagine a small Buddhist shrine by a student's bed in the name of manifesting a religious belief. How far can we stretch the limits of rights and freedom without breaking established standards? Who is the judge? Who stands condemned in this matter? Tonight, the big questions worth considering. How do we balance freedoms or rights with standards in schools? Really, how far can we go? Has education not evolved beyond appearances in order to embrace cultural diversities and open-mindedness and minority group without opening the floodgates of divergence at an absurd level? Has the time come for a careful consideration of our education policies as a country? How about formalizing our exemption clauses without compromising discipline? Tonight, we probe how far is too far in the expression of rights. My guest tonight, Mr. Michael Nsoa, former Director General of the Ghana Education Service, GES, Alhaji Yakub Abubakar, President, Conference of Heads of Assisted Schools, CHAS, will also join us via Zoom. Bright Appiah is Executive Director, Charles Wright International, also a Charles Wright advocate, also via Zoom, and Sheila Minka-Premo, Chairperson, Executive Council, Lawa, Ghana. We are live on the JoyNews channel, Joy 99.7 FM, affiliate across Ghana, Love 99.5 FM in Kumasi, DSTV is 421, GoTV 144, Joy Prime, all our social media platforms, we are live. Please, it's time for you to be heard. Send your questions and contributions now. I am MF Apau. We're right back. Thanks for staying with us for tonight's edition of The Probe. We're talking about our education and the fine line between freedoms and standards in our schools on the back of the rejection of some Rastafarians to the Achimota school. This has dominated discussions the whole week. We are attempting to put to rest this matter tonight on The Probe. But like I said, I have the former Executive Director or Director General of the Ghana Education Service, Mr. Michael Nsoa, with me here in the studio. Also via Zoom, we have Bright Appiah, who is with the Charles Wright, Executive Director of Charles Wright International, also a Charles Wright advocate. We also have Sheila Minka-Premo, Chairperson, Executive Council, Lawa, and of course, President of Conference of Heads of Assisted Schools, CHAS, Alhaji Yakub Abubakar, my guest via Zoom. Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to The Probe.
Thank you.
Thank you. I want to hear you via Zoom, so we are sure that everything is fine. Welcome, Mr. Appiah.
Thank you.
Okay, great. Sheila Minka-Premo, you're welcome.
Thank you very
Alhaji,
much.
you're doing well.
Yes, I am.
Okay, Alhaji, welcome. Alhaji, you have to unmute. Okay, so it looks like we are all set for tonight. But it's just appropriate that I start with you, Mr. Nsoa, since you're with me in the studio and also a former Director General of the Ghana Education Service. This is a raging issue. I'm dying to hear your thoughts on this because the GES first issued a directive to Achimota School when this issue happened that they should admit the children. Then later, unofficially, we're hearing that after a meeting, the GES made a U-turn and then said that that directive was given because of the media uproar and all. You still have ears and eyes in there because you chair the council and all. What exactly are your thoughts briefly on this issue?
Oh, I think it's about non-compliance of some parents. Because all the parents that went to Achimota and collected prospectus and rules and regulations, I'm not sure everybody was happy with everything that was on the prospectus or the rules and regulations, but because they had to comply in order to get their children admitted into Achimota, they took the. But so you go to Achimota, you see something peculiar about Achimota. You want your children to have that sort of. So you decide to go to Achimota. You are fascinated about Achimota, the way they did everything about Achimota. Now you go there and then you think that no, you want to change Achimota. That cannot happen. Because Achimota has built this tradition almost 100 years ago, 1924, 27. We are in 2021, so it's about 100 years. So why do you want to change it? Those things that made you, that attracted you to decide to select Achimota for your children. Why do you want to change that tradition? So that is the...
Even if the tradition is a cake?
How can it be a cake? Because the people who went to Achimota, and for that matter, every school are proud of their alma mater. And that is something that you need to take into cognizance because it's not something that happened over a decade. It's been there for so many years.
Okay.
So it is important that if you decide to go to Achimota, or for that matter, any other school, you need to be sure what you are looking for. And if it doesn't meet your expectation, of course, there are 700 schools.
Well, you speak as an educationist, and the issues about rights of the child and these children have also come up. And thankfully, we have the finest lawyers when it comes to these issues joining us as well. But Alhaji Yakub, when this issue came up, of course, we had NAGRAT and the rest of them issuing threats, raising concerns. I don't know if CHAS is with NAGRAT on this particular position that they've taken. And Alhaji, you would have to unmute yourself. Okay, so unfortunately, we've just dropped Alhaji. He's dropped. Well, we'll get him back joining us shortly via Zoom because I'm dying to hear CHAS's view also on this, as well as issues about the regulatory framework that we need to have for all the schools. But Mr. Appiah, you are a child rights advocate and not just limiting this issue to just the Achimota issue, because it's time for us to expand the discussion in terms of the fine line between, the freedoms as well as the standards in our schools. What exactly are your views when it comes to this particular issue that has dominated discussions over the period?
Yeah, well, it was a bit strange to me to see these kind of things happening in our schools, where in the past we've had a tradition where parents can't be in a position to negotiate with schools on the basis of specific needs of children, and then they will be admitted in schools. So I was a bit alarmed because of the way things went and the event that they took. We've had this in the past where some schools have admitted people of that nature, and there have never been any case whatsoever in terms of what is happening. And even the current admission, you still have some schools still admitting such people. So it's rather unfortunate that they find ourselves in all this situation. But let's also look at some of the things that has happened in the past. We're talking about Achimota, but there are other schools that are also doing certain things, do have certain rules that people traditionally want us to respect. Of course, I belong to the school of thought that believe that the rules of school must be respected and we should not downplay its effect and what it can bring aboard. But what is needed in the process is that the child's welfare must always be of a primary consideration in the process, so that any action whatsoever that we take will still protect the interests of children. But let's look at Achimota. And Mr. Nsowa alluded to some tradition that has established Achimota. But if you look at the tradition of Achimota, it's a very inclusive concept that was introduced. So, and in the past, we've had all manner of people attending Achimota. So Achimota is not a school that Mr. Nsowa can even use as example in expressing his view in terms of how people or schools have responded to the needs of children in the past. Achimota has been a very inclusive institution, and they have accommodated all manner of people, and they have built them up to the level in which they are. So it's not as if somebody wants to change a tradition, but if you really want to talk about tradition of Achimota, it's very inclusive concept that they have. So if this could have happened in any other school, and we would say that, okay, maybe based on their tradition, they've not experienced that, but not in Achimota, looking at where they are coming from and what had led to the establishment of Achimota. So let's open up and then see how best institutions can also reform their laws to conform to the welfare of the child. And we know that most of the schools also develop their rules and regulations before the passage of the Children's Act. Some went in through the reviews, have updated theirs and all that. But the core principle that guides the process was made in 1998. So most of the rules and regulations that were made probably did not conform to certain principles. Now that we have a clear mandate in terms of how the state want to respond to the needs of children, then there's a need for these schools to also look at the standard that we have in the system so that they can conform to it. So it's not about maintaining a tradition, but it's also by responding to the needs of children, especially when it comes to their welfare.
Okay. Shilaminka Premo, the issue about the laws or the standards as against the freedoms of these children also comes up. Where do you stand on this? Hello, Sheila. Oh, you have to unmute yourself, Sheila. We can hear you. Hello?
Is it
much better now? Great, we can hear you now.
Okay. Thank you very much. Speaking as a lawyer, you know, a lot of human rights issues requires sort of a balancing of different rights. Okay? The right to education is entrenched in our Constitution. So 25 talks about it. And it's part of the fundamental human rights section of our Constitution, which the state is supposed to uphold. Okay? So the state has a responsibility to respect it, has a responsibility, again, to ensure that they protect it and to promote it as well. As Bright indicated, it's, you know, when it comes to the rights of children in Article 28, it has been concretized in our children's, the Children's Acts, 1998, Act 560. And there's a clause in it which says that children have a right to education. They should not be deprived of that right. But if you, so basically, you know, if I'm speaking as a child rights activist, as Bright is doing, I'll just say, yes, a child has a right to education and not, you know, basically be given access. But then you have to look at that whole right in relation to other things which are also in the Constitution, okay? And try to measure things. And the key thing about this right is that it also comes from one of the international instruments, which is the Convention on the Rights of the Child, okay? And it has an interesting provision when it comes to the right to education, okay? It indicates, if I may quote a little bit, it says that, you know, children have a right to education, but they are to, so states, member states of the Convention on the Rights of the Child are to encourage different forms of secondary education, including, you know, vocational, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And then it also says, you know, it has something about this thing. So if you look at that, the fact that there are different options. So the state is supposed to provide education, is supposed to ensure that children have a right to education, but then there are certain other issues that also come into play. One of the key ones I found is in Article 14 of the Constitution, which talks about freedom of, it talks about Article 14 of the Constitution, which is about the protection of personal liberty. There's a clause in it.
The clause E, the E.
Yes, Article 14. But it says that there are a few limitations when it comes to protection of the rights of personal liberty. So everyone is entitled to personal liberty and, you know, except in certain circumstances. And with regard to children, it says that for the purpose of the education and welfare of a person who has not attained the age of 18 years, that means there are certain, you know, responsibilities, conditions, et cetera, that can come into play. And I believe that that has resulted in many of the schools having all the rules and regulations, okay? The right to education, when it comes to secondary education, yes, there are different types of schools that we have. We have, you know, co-ed educational secondary schools, or senior high schools. We have single-sex schools. But
on that particular clause that you talk about, the personal liberties, we've heard some lawyers say that the personal liberties in this can be interpreted as just movement. You can't add issues about the appearances to it. You hold the same view?
I think that when you're looking at the fundamental freedoms, I mean, I would say that it's good to try to look at them in totality. Okay. Yes, somebody can say that comes under a particular section of the Constitution, which is just talking about personal liberty. It's not necessarily linked up with education. Okay. So I believe that somebody can hold that view. Ultimately, in determining whether or not it applies to education or not, it is that would determine that whole issue. Okay. So yes, the right to education sort of is somewhere, it stands in another section of the Constitution. Freedom to, the right to education is a bit different in another section. But still, I think that in totality, it's still good to try to look at things in total. So the thing is, when it comes to this Achimota school, what I'll say is I don't have all the facts.
Okay.
It's only information I've gleaned from different platforms and some discussions, etc.
Well, there are a number of audience questions that will get us to go further into this matter. But let's bring in Alhaji Yakub. I'm told we have him join us now. Alhaji, I was asking earlier if you are with NAGRAT on the same page on this particular issue, because we heard NAGRAT issue threats amongst others, mentioning that the GES directive ought to be rescinded. What exactly is the heads of our sister schools' position on this particular issue, knowing that rules and regulations, we ought to hold it there, but of course we are told that each school is implementing their own rules and regulations. Do we have one rule and regulation for every school, or you are all doing what you like?
Thank you very much, Emifa, for this opportunity. Indeed, what took place at Achimota is something that I would say is common throughout the senior high schools that we have in the country. In that, by our rules and regulations, we ensure that students conduct themselves in such a manner that they give absolute time to their teaching and learning in the school. And any activity that will disrupt that is frowned upon. So the low cutting of hair is seen as one of the areas that can take a lot of the time of the students should they be allowed to leave their hair the way they want it to be. You will bear with me that maintaining hair is not an easy thing. Apart from hygiene and other reasons that are concerned, your colleagues that you are living with in the classroom, in the dormitory, depending on how you go about it, will either be comfortable for them or otherwise. So since the school environment is for the purposes of learning, since time immemorial, this practice has been there that if you are coming to school for the purposes of learning, lower your hair so that you will not be bothered how to style it and stuff like that, and you will not be bothered with things being in your hair that will disturb your other colleague students and what have you.
But there are other schools on that argument. There are other schools, Alhaji. On that argument, some would say we have international schools that allow that. How does it affect the education of the child? Is it not time for us to do away with such practices? You don't think it's time? And I was asking a direct question whether you support NAGRAT on the position that they took. If you could give me a direct answer to that first.
It is a practice that is going on throughout our senior high schools in the country.
So you support NAGRAT on that position?
We are all practicing that by asking our students to cut low their hair. That one is a conclusive issue. But like our Honorable Minister said, it has come to the fore and they are looking at it comprehensively to come out with certain guidelines that we hope will address all these challenges that we are having for now. But we who are on the ground, what we are telling you is that we think it will serve better the purpose of education if students are guided in this area so that time is not wasted in trying to maintain the hair, put it in a particular style, and also it will disrupt other students who are likely to be influenced by such things in the school environment.
Well, we'll get into the questions. So I was asking Alhaji Yakub earlier, that this issue about the hair and how it would disturb the children and all, we've seen international schools, a number of schools that you have children go there and they have the hair. It does not affect, in fact, they perform better than those who are in the GES system. So how then do we make hair such a big issue?
Well, education is not about hair. So if international schools allow them and ostensibly they say they perform better, that's a different matter.
They say?
Yeah.
Don't they?
Well, because you see, in Ghana, what we haven't done is the tracking system. What happens to these children when they pass through the secondary level and then go up there? What happens to them?
Okay.
We haven't done enough research to know. I think some years back, Professor Ademensa and the other one, I forgot it, did some research with students in the Winneba. And they saw that those from the so-called Saito schools, as they move up, become very excellent students. So that's why I want us to leave that, because the hair and the performance.
But how would you rate the way or the handling of this issue by the Ghana Education Service? As at now, we've heard from the minister say that, of course, they'll come out with a comprehensive plan for this going forward. But earlier, when we had that directive from the Ghana Education Service and then the later U-turn, nothing has been heard from the Education Service. How would you rate the handling of this particular matter by the Education
the handling,
Service?
maybe it was a misunderstanding of the procedure for admission into schools. Now, when you are placed in a school from the machine room or from the computer, you are placed. You have not been enrolled. The procedure is that you go to the school and be briefed about the rules and regulations of the school, and then get your prospectus. Maybe the prospectus alone will frighten you, and then you say, "Oh, I can't come to this school." But more importantly, the rules and regulations are key, because if you've decided to go to school A, you see, you have seen something good about the school A. That's why. That's what the school will insist that. This is the way we dress here. This is the way we cut our hair here.
Okay.
So if you want to become part of us, please, you have to follow.
Okay.
And if you decide not, it means you cannot be enrolled.
Okay. Let's get into the questions, the audience questions that we've received so far. Then we can get into the issues. Samira says, please, we also see some schools where Muslim students are not permitted to wear hijab or compelled to join Christian prayers and worship. Does that amount to a breach of their rights? I'm sure the lawyers will take that. Philip says, will refusing to enroll a child who has met the requirements of admission not amount to a breach of his right to education? Is the question. Kofi says, what's the position of the law on the practice of religion for citizens generally? How about for students in schools? And this one says, why do we not assess our rules and regulations as often as we are supposed to? We seem to have a habit of sticking to guidelines, even if they are irrelevant to the times. Okay, so some questions that have come in there on the issues about rights and all. So let's go into, I'm sure this one is for the lawyers. Mr. Bright up here, and then Sheila Minka, you take the issues for us. The very first questions, I'm sure that you got them right. These are concerns that have come in. The first batch of questions, maybe you want to take them for us. You'd have to unmute, right?
Please, I'm not a lawyer. I think the only lawyer we have here is Madam. Just because of the work that I do, I have a legal background, but I'm not a lawyer.
Okay, so the issues about rights coming up, but I'm sure you can touch briefly on it. Then Sheila can take the legal matters in that issue.
Yeah, I think that just as we're talking about rights, the certain things must also be looked in context. We cannot issue a general blanket or a check to say that everything must fall in line. That is why in the past, if you ask the head of CHARS, would also tell you that there are specific instances where they've allowed certain things to apply in some schools just because of a certain structure. And I'm reiterating that I support that schools must have rules and regulations. I don't want us to downplay that. However, the flexibility must also show in specific instances to guarantee children their right and then also establish their welfare as a core principle in the things that they do. So if a child comes to school and per the belief and the tradition of the child should supposed to wear is it jihad or hijab, whatever they call it?
Hijab.
I think that I don't see why our school system will not allow such a child to have that thing on. I don't see why, because we should. You see, we have promoted a certain concept in the past. Even why we have boarding schools is for a purpose, so that we bring people from all manner of places to have interaction to build that national agenda that we want to see. So I don't think that our school system should limit children to have access to that environment, irrespective of what they need to do. But you see, the issue also comes back to the issue of is a matter of lifestyle. Because if you listen to Alaji, clearly he says that things in the environment must not disrupt learning. So these are basic things that talks about lifestyle. So there's a need for us to also look at, to draw a clear distinction between what the lifestyle will constitute in the lives of our children and what their belief systems are, and how we can shape that belief system to correspond with the school environment and how children must behave and all that. So if you are able to do that, I don't think that we would have difficulties with insisting that children must respond to certain things and all that. And when it comes to the welfare of children, it is only the state that has the mandate to decide the way and manner that we want to go about it. So the state provides a framework, and any other person that will live within must conform to the state principle and then also come up with rules and regulations that do not infringe on what the state provides that we should do for our children. And in this instance, the state is clear what the state wants for our children. So when you read the welfare principle, it says that in all matters, include whether it involves individuals, it involves state institutions, and even the court, the law says that the best interest of the child must be paramount.
Okay.
So clearly, we've set the tone for discussion. So it is on the basis of that the schools can also adjust their rules to accommodate some of these things so that we can gradually shape our children to a level where we want them to be. So I don't want us to have the discussion to mean that even when you are or confers a son or child, you can come to school to come and do your activities and all that. We also have to regulate the environment, but we have to largely respond to the welfare of children, and that is our argument. Okay,
Alaji, so the issue about hijabs also comes, so it's not like it's just the issue about the hair or the long hair, but it's also the question that is coming up that even some Muslim students are not allowed to wear their hijab in some schools, in some cases forced to also participate in, church activities and all. I'm sure these are issues that you're hoping to regulate as well, or ensure that it happens.
Yes, please. We are hoping all these issues will be looked at, but truth must be said. You see, before you go to any institution, you need to study and know the belief system and the interest of that institution, and consider your individual interest too. If you care so much about your belief and you wouldn't want to compromise it, then that should inform you about the choice of school that you would make in going further. You can't eat your cake and have it. So that if a particular school has its principles and you know that they are very firm on it, and yours is in variance with that school's own, then you better have to advise yourself to go to other schools that are a bit moderate and more accommodating as far as your principles are concerned. We know in this our country, most of our schools are established with mission background. They have their beliefs that they want to protect, they want to defend, they want to uphold to, and wouldn't be interested in getting people to come to dilute it one way or the other. So there are other schools that are a bit moderate. For example, you come to Tiamadia Senior High School in Kumasi, it is known all over the world that the liberalism in the school is such that we have produced even moderators of the Presbyterian Church who went through the school as students. Yeah. We give liberty to students to a certain level to practice their faith and go about their studies without any hindrance. Now, if you know such a school is there and you are interested, nobody denies you. But if you want to go to some schools that are very firm, very rigid in their rules, then you must be ready to submit to whatever. But all said and done, I think things are changing with time. And like I earlier said, our Minister of Education has assured us, in fact, they are in contact with stakeholders, gathering view to come out with a comprehensive document that will address this issue that is before us all.
Okay, so Sheila, issues about legalities and the rights of the child. Samira was raising that question. We also saw some questions on this issue about, legalities, what the law says, the rights of these children also comes up. I'm sure you briefly want to touch on that.
Yes, so maybe I'll just contribute towards the discussion. Look at what some of the provisions that are in the Constitution. When it comes to educational rights, it's very, the language that is used is important. It says that all persons shall have the right to equal educational opportunities. Okay, opportunities. When it comes to children, Article 28 4 indicates that no child shall be deprived by any other person of education by reason only religious or other belief. Okay, so you raise the issue of the hijab, which is very similar to this, hair issue. But in all the discussions, from what Ms. Nsewa said and from what the man from CHAS and Alaji is saying, looks as if there are a number of options which are available. I know that the school placement mechanism has made it a little more rigid. But for me, so long as there are opportunities available for people to choose from, okay, on what their own belief system, where they'll be comfortable, etc., etc. Because I know that there are also some girls' schools which are Islamic girls' schools, and I think all the girls are required to wear the hijab. However, other schools which have certain other rules and regulations, they don't want the children. In schools, people have what they call the uniforms, etc., etc. So yes, I still insist that the child has a right to education, but then it has to be exercised in a very pragmatic way so that it doesn't bring undue problems. So long as the state has made available options, okay, there's options when it comes to selecting education, places where you can go to where, based on your religious preference, you'll feel more comfortable. I believe that it's in line with the Convention on the Rights of the Child, which is to give options. If we seek to make it so rigid, then we will have difficulties.
But does the rights of the child, is it not curtailed if they are not allowed to go to the school of their choice? At least this is where they were placed. So if I have a right to education and this is the school I want to go, and then you deny me that chance to do that, are you not curtailing my right to education? Is that not what the case is?
In a way, yes. As Bright indicated, as far as children are concerned, it's the best interest of the child. The welfare principle is the key thing. It's the best interest of the child. So what, a child has chosen a particular school and the child is being denied. In the Achimota case, I haven't heard of religion coming up. It's just the hair. I understand that the child was given access.
But the child says that's their religion. No. That's their religion, he says.
As far as from the discussions I've had so far, that's what I'm saying. I mean, I think that the reason why there's this problem now is the child's refusal to cut the hair. And that's affecting the child's ability to go to this particular school of choice. Okay. It's, at the end of the day, it's a court that will decide. So look at all the laws available. It will balance the various rights and to come up with a decision which which is appropriate, to see whether, based on this denial, the child is being denied the right to education or a particular school of a choice. It would also look at whether if there are options, maybe DS is able to provide another school that has that makes it possible for the child to go with the hairstyle of choice.
Okay.
It becomes a personal right against the school for its refusal. Okay. But in terms of state's provision, I think that it's, because of the that are available, it's at least it's a right which is not be used totally. Okay. It's child's wishes are not being he's not getting the wish but then there are options.
Okay.
So I think.
Well, I'll come to the studio because you've been itching to contribute to the questions that have come up. So let's hear you, then we can get into the other issues, because the issues about the child's rights being curtailed because they are denied admission to one particular school of their choice and all.
Well, I'm surprised that this whole thing is turning into religion and so on and so forth. There's no rule or the rules and regulations who talks about religion, because that has been curtailed already by the Constitution. So you decide, like the headmaster said, you decide where you want to go. If a school A belonging to a religion or the other is very, very strict, then you must as well advise yourself whether you can go there. If you cannot obey all the rules and regulations there, then there's a problem, because the school will insist, and therefore the issue about your right and so on, like I hope I got the lawyer correct that. The law says every child that comes into this country must be given opportunity to go to school.
Yes. Right to education.
Yeah. Type of schools or specific schools are not mentioned. So, and the government or the nation has done well to have, if you take secondary school, more than 700 schools. That's why when you are even doing the selection, some people do the selection, and for all the 5 selected schools, sometimes they don't get anything. Because if you don't get A, you can also look at B and see. As we speak now, there are so many vacancies, and there are so many children saying that they have not been placed or have been enrolled.
Because some of them do not qualify.
No. For those who qualify. For those who qualify.
Okay.
There are more.
But you ought to have a certain grade to be able to get the top schools that you want.
That's what I'm saying.
And this particular children, they qualify to get to that school. Then
as for this, if you still, we can also look at that. If you insist you want to go to Achimota had about 6,000 applications, and they can only enroll about 1,500. So if you think it's your right, and Achimota by all means take you, that's where the grades count. Because if you don't get a certain level to do the science or general arts, certainly you will not be able to get admission to any school, not only Achimota. So this issue about religion is unfortunate. We must drop it, because the children were not denied because they belong to a certain faith. They were denied because a simple sentence or line in the rules and regulations says any child coming to the school must have the head low, must cut the head low. That's a very simple.
A religious consideration does not come up for
there's
you,
no
even though they
connotation.
say it's because of their religion.
Yeah. It said cut your hair low for all the schools. For all the schools, say cut your hair low.
Okay.
That's all.
We get into the next batch of questions at this point. This one says, are the schools not supposed to be where we teach our kids their real identity and encourage them to cherish their roots? Is a question.
Which roots?
And then one says, can we really have a standard when we are dealing with a mixed batch of cultures and religions in a secular state like Ghana? One also says, by our current standards of standardization, are we not unfairly making it difficult for people to manifest their faith, while inevitably creating a safe space for others to do the same thing we are preventing people from doing? Abla says, do these laws generally apply any different if the school, for instance, is one that identifies with a particular religion, like some schools saying we have a Catholic outlook, and to what extent will they enforce it? That's the questions that have come up. Okay, so we'll take this one, then we go on Zoom. So are the schools not supposed to be where we teach our kids their real identity and encourage them to cherish their roots, amongst others?
That's another issue. Whose identity are we talking about? You see, we expect children who are now growing up to be obedient to rules and regulations. But this, in the case of this Achimota issue, the parent says, I belong to a religion and my children belong to. That is also an issue for me, because who decided for the children to be whatever. I don't want to pinpoint only because they are not yet 18 to decide for themselves. Meanwhile, the child was, in an interview, said, if it comes to cutting his hair, he would rather abandon the school. Why can the child who cannot decide for himself, because he can say that?
That means so you know that most of us growing up,
yes,
we didn't have to choose to be Christians,
but
by virtue of the fact that we were growing up in
the Presbyterian, the Catholics, when they grow up, many of them leave these churches and go and join other churches. It's because they are of age. Now they can think for themselves. So is it the case that we are making noise about protecting the rights of the child, when in fact we are protecting the imposition of this kind of behavior by their parents?
Okay. Mr. Appiah, so there are a few questions on the current standardization and if we are not unfairly making it difficult for people to manifest their faith. There's also an issue about is the schools not supposed to be where we teach our kids their real identity and encourage them to cherish their roots? You have done some work in the schools as well, so I'm sure you're best placed to also speak to these questions that have come up.
Yeah, you know, the school is a learning center. And per the arrangement, we've made a school environment a place where our children will learn. Therefore, anything that happens in that environment must always geared towards promoting that learning environment for children. And even if you look at the mandate of Ghana Education Service, the mandate of Ghana Education Service, for which Mr. Nsowa is the chair for the council, it states that the mandate is to ensure that all Ghanaian children of school-going age, irrespective of tribe, gender, disability, religious and political affiliation, are provided with equal formal education and training. Yeah. So that is the mandate of Ghana Education Service. So clearly, if you look at the mandate, it is inherent in it that it's a learning environment. And anybody at all whatsoever must have access to that environment. But once you find yourself in that environment, yes, certain rules and regulations must apply in order to deal with the social factors. It's very, very, very important. You see, in the case of this child, it is true that the school did not premise their refusal on the basis of religion. But the child, at the end of the day, told the school that what I have on my hair is on the basis of my belief. That's why I have it. So if you did not make your argument on the basis of religion, and the child is reminding the school that what I have on is on the basis of my religion, then that consideration must be given to the child. That is a simple matter. You see, I wanted to cite Ahmadiyya as an example, and the head of child, Alhaji, has made it so clear. There are people who have been to Ahmadiyya, and they've never had any hindrance whatsoever, and now they are doing whatever they are supposed to do in society. There are people who went to Catholic schools. They were Muslims, but they were given opportunity to go to those schools, and then they are out there. So let's look at some of these things and then place in a context. There is no school in Ghana that the government of Ghana is a stakeholder that will still classify himself to belong to a certain faith. If you'd want to have a Catholic school and you feel that within the Catholic system there are certain practices that you want to do, then be the owner of that school. It's as simple as that. But once it's under the management of Ghana Education Service and per their mandate, irrespective of whoever that child is, the ultimate responsibility of the state is to ensure that the interest of the child is protected, irrespective of where the child is coming from. So that principle must shape the way and manner we roll out certain policies and programs to benefit our children. So that is, for me, the way that we have to look at it. But if we begin to look at issues of structure, issues of forms, without necessarily looking at the substantive matter that we have to discuss, then it is an issue. Because in this case, for instance, you see that there's a clash between the right to education, fundamental freedoms, and then school rules and regulations. So in all this, I think that just as Madam said, we need a court to place this in context.
Okay.
And And that step to be taken so that all of us will be clear in our minds that this is the position of the state and this is how the state wants us to train our children. And then once we are clear, then I think it will settle all these issues.
Okay. Alhaji, well, this is an issue that has brought a lot of divergence of opinion because, of course, it's about the people's sensibilities and sensitivities. But people have had cause to raise concern about what exactly then we are impacting into our children. When we can't have a divergence, we can't accept some of these, forward-moving, some would say, cultures and habits. What then are you teaching our children about how they can embrace other cultures and other beliefs amongst themselves? That's some of the issues that people are raising.
Thank you very much. You see, in the school environment, much as we entertain this idea of inculcating in the children divergent views, our paramount concern is what will promote teaching and learning at the school level. And so any practice that we think would affect it negatively, we don't encourage that. So, for example, it is necessary to let the students dress as simple as possible to go through their education without any hindrance. All the other discussions that are going on, it is at the school level that indeed the students get those things. But we look at it from the angle of to what extent will this behavior disturb the learning of the children at the school environment? And like I said from the beginning, you will agree with me very well. A person with a low level hair has little time to give to certain things as against somebody who keeps that long thing and would have to maintain it in a way that will be conducive for himself and others who are living with him. So school therefore wants the students to give their maximum attention to their books, to their learning. And that is where our concern is. How we address it is another issue that we are all trying to look at it and come up with something that will be acceptable. Definitely to be very rigid on some of these things will not help because it will bring about more problems than we are looking at now.
What would you say, Alhaji, to those who say... We shouldn't do it in such a way that it will affect the system to which we belong to. You go to other places, like this Western world, the extent of liberty they have given to their children there is such that the teacher will walk into the classroom and wouldn't bother to address and correct the students in many things. He will just go and teach directly and walk out. I remember during one of my visits to the United States of America, I had an interview on one of their FM stations, and this issue came up. And when I gave our African part, many people called and said, in fact, they regretted with what they were having there and would wish that there is some level of control for their children because we are giving them training. And this is what GES, Ghana Education Service, and for that matter, CHAS is saying that give us some level of liberty to instill discipline in these students so that they know what is right and what is wrong. When they grow and they are adults, like at the tertiary level, nobody compels them to do some of these things that we are talking about here. Why is it an issue here? Because at this level, they need certain level of training. And it is when we are given the chance to train them by letting them know the do's and don'ts that they will be on the right course and move along with us, please. Okay, but you don't think that it's time for us to take a look at some of these...
Hello, Aniva, I'm done.
It's unfortunate. It looks like Alhaji is unable to hear me on this, but... Mr. Nsoa, earlier we were talking about it, but let me come to Madam Sheila Menka Premo, then we can wrap up on Zoom. Then I come to you in the studios because we have little time. But do you think that it is time for us to take a look at some of these rules and regulations that some people have described as a cake?
Thank you very much. I think that's, from time to time, it's always good to look back, see what's guides you, and if there's a need based on current trends, based on new learnings, research findings, to change things as and when it's necessary. So I do think that it's a very good initiative which the GS has undertaken now to maybe come up with some rules. I believe that as they're doing it, in the process of doing it, some of the new learning, some of the new research findings on appropriate learning environments, etc., I'm sure they will consider it coming up.
Okay. Well,
very important.
Okay, right. Well, we've seen a number of cases elsewhere, at least out of 5 cases or so, the children all won that case, except the one in Jamaica. We've seen the one in the UK, South Africa, Malawi, Kenya, amongst others. At least most of them in the favor of the children, except the case in Jamaica where it was based on health grounds and hygiene. But going forward, one would have wished that it does not end up in court per se. But going forward, how do you expect that GES and the Education Ministry, for instance, be dealing with this issue such that it would bring it to rest once and for all?
I think GES must be very consistent with its applications of what they believe in, based on what their mandate says, and also standardize the system for heads of institutions to also have in their rules and regulations certain principles that the state believes in. Because at the end of the day, we need to also safeguard the environment for the welfare of children. So it means that the schools itself has some role to play in terms of disciplinary actions that will benefit children, for which we should not take for granted. Again, we should also look at things in a manner that will not necessarily be looking at protecting the prestige of the school, but would also be looking at how best our children can have access to the environment. And know that a child who has qualified, who has been to primary school, who has been to GHS, who has qualified to come to Achimota, is not just an ordinary person that we can just drive away on the basis of his or her makeup. But let's always protect the dignity of our children and then engage them in a manner that would always serve the interests of this nation. So for me, that consistency, Ghana Education Service must show that. It's very, very important, very, very, very important, because you see different stakeholders within the same institution espousing different ideas and principles when it comes to the very schools that they are managing. And for me, it shows that they don't have, because our assessment shows that they don't even have any policy, standardized policy that regulates, that even gives some credence to how schools and school rules must be fashioned out and all that. So for me, moving forward, I think that the call made by the minister is a good call. And I expect that CHAS, which more or less are the managers of the school, would also collaborate with the ministry and Ghana Education Service to come up with policies that will be beneficial to children and then also will safeguard the welfare of children within the school environment.
Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Bright-Appiah. But I'll end with you, Mr. Nsoa. So going forward, at this point, we want to settle this matter, and hopefully that it will be, a reference point for other issues to come, so that we can resolve this. How do you expect that we do going forward? At least you are the Children's Council.
I think I want to refer Mr. Bright-Appiah. By the close of 2020, we have reviewed these rules and regulations for secondary schools.
So we are reviewing it again. The minister said in Parliament, saying that we are going to have, another framework. So
the minister said that it's because, the final stage of that review did not complete before all these things, COVID and all these school closures and so on. So from time to time, GES reviews based on some of the issues that come up over the years. So it's not like something that is untouchable.
Okay.
No. But again, let me emphasize the fact that this whole issue is about compliance. These are the school rules and regulations. A lot of people, all the children that pass through Achimota and other schools, comply with those things. Why has it become difficult for this person? And let me give a typical example in which I was involved about 6 years ago. A Bangladeshi girl was admitted to the same Achimota. And it was the same objection by the school administration that unless the hair, which normally something can be done about it, or cut, then they would not admit the girl. And the parents came to see me. I was then out of office. So I went to the school, the then Director General at SEGA, and said, look, let's have a dialogue with the school administration and see how best. So in the end, it was agreed that the girl was a day student, so anytime she's coming to school, she should tie the hair into a pony
Okay.
ponytail. And that was accepted by both sides.
These can also tie it into a ponytail.
By both sides. So if they could have had the patience to sit down with the administration and look at various ways in which this hair can be controlled.
So how come they were not given that option as well?
No,
but the Bangladeshi given the option because it's not
no. The parents brought in this religious issue, and that complicated
them. But they are
them.
also bringing, because they brought in religious issue, that's how come.
That's what I'm saying.
Okay. All right.
So they sat down, but this person, these parents said, no, it is their religion, and therefore they cannot do anything about it. And when it comes to that, then of course, if I want to maintain the Achimota standards, I will surely put my...
Okay, but where exactly are we with the review of this current policy?
No. As I said, they reviewed, the draft, everything was ready. Copies were even sent to Child Rights International. Pardon?
With the current
one,
that
we didn't have this problem.
Okay.
You know, this thing has come up. Maybe the future revision will take care of these things.
Okay. Well, we'll leave it here for now. I'm sure the conversation continues. Thank you very much for your time, Mr. Michael Nsoa, former DG of the Ghana Education Service, also the Council of the Education Service, also Alhaji Yakub Abubakar, President, Conference of Heads of Assisted Schools, CHAS. Thank you. We also have Mr. Bright Appiah, Executive Director, Child Rights International, and also a child rights advocate, and Sheila Minka Premo, Chairperson, Executive Council, LAWA. Thank you so much for your time, ladies and gentlemen, on tonight's edition of The Probe. There's more news when you log on to myjoyonline.com. And coming up next on radio, for our radio audience, we have a Walk with Jesus. We're hosting Bishop Charles Ajinasare, who is a man of God, who is a good one. You want to stay for that. I am MFA Pau. Another edition of The Probe comes your way next Sunday. On behalf of the team, thank you so much for your time.